What's up, guys? Part-time Gamer Dad here, and a little bit of a different look. I just kind of wanted to talk to you today about the fact that Ricochet is leaving WWE. So after what we saw on Monday Night Raw, and according to all of these reliable dirt sheets, it appears that Trevor Mann, aka Ricochet, is on his way out of the door of the WWE. He's given his notice, and his contract is up here really soon. And last night we saw Braun Breaker just destroy and eviscerate Ricochet in the parking lot. So safe to assume, I believe that he's been written off TV. Now, I think it's also safe to assume that he's going to be heading to the other promotion, All Elite Wrestling. And while, yes, New Japan Pro Wrestling is there and it's available to him, and that's the place he first acquired viral fame against Will Ospreay in the Best of the Super Juniors tournament in 2016, I think the more attractive move is to AEW. So today I'm going to tell you my Elite 8 dream opponents in AEW for the one and only Ricochet. So at number 8, I've got Malachi Black. Back when Black and Ricochet first were called up to the main roster from NXT, they teamed up to join the ranks of the tag team division on Monday Night Raw. They even challenged for the tag team titles at WrestleMania 35. Having this built-in history between the two previously really lends itself to some unique storytelling. I think there's a path that could lead to some really unique story beats, and it involves two incredibly talented wrestlers. But then you also got to talk about integrating Malachi's stable, House of Black. And much like the recent program with Adam Copeland, I think there's something to be said about keeping the focus on the main two guys, which in that case was Copeland and Black. In this case, it'd be Ricochet and Malachi. I just don't want to see faction warfare. I don't want Ricochet to be randomly paired up with two guys so that it's an even 3-on-3 affair. Also, at the same time, I think that could be fun depending on who you pair with them. Regardless of how they want to execute this, though, I think putting the Dutchman against Ricochet as Ricochet's first true feud in AEW is the right call. It gives those who don't really know Ricochet plenty of exposure, lets him establish himself in who he's going to be in AEW, and so I think this is a first great feud for him. Coming in at number 7, I have Claudio Castagnoli. I was really tempted to put Jon Moxley in this spot. And while I don't hate that matchup, I just find Claudio versus Ricochet way more enticing. A lot of that is due to the fact that Claudio is super strong, and matching his power against Ricochet's quickness is like a dream come true. Bringing that clash of styles into this kind of matchup, it would really benefit both of them. We've seen it work with Claudio when he was Cesaro against Sami Zayn in those classic matchups in NXT. We've also seen it more recently in terms of Ricochet and using his quickness, but also his low-key strength against bigger guys like Ivar on Monday Night Raw. Of all the matchups on this list, this is probably the most fun due to the dynamic pairing, but it's also almost a guarantee that this would have the potential to steal the show of any card it's on, regardless of the other matches on the show. Number 6, I have MJF. I was hesitant to even put MJF on the list because I think MJF, while really good, he's kind of in this weird babyface tweener role. But almost I feel like that's what makes this work so well because Ricochet is undeniably a babyface. So while it would be really easy to say people are going to cheer for MJF over Ricochet, I don't think that's the case. I think that what Ricochet can do in the ring is so impressive and so awe-inspiring that this matchup would lend itself to being more of a Ricochet-supported affair. Now, of course, MJF is their guy, so I see MJF going over in this kind of matchup, and this would be exhibition-based. I think this is something you find on a Dynamite or a Collision if they want to go crazy and just give people a match to talk about for this year on Collision. But overall, I think it'd be a fun match. It's nothing special. I think the dynamic nature of it is interesting, but clearly this wouldn't be a feud because Ricochet just couldn't keep up with MJF on the mic, and I think this would just have to be a one-off. Now, something that wouldn't have to be a one-off is my number 5 pick, and that's Kazuchika Okada. It blows my mind that Okada and Ricochet have never had a singles match. All the time they spent in New Japan together, they never wrestled each other. And now, we got to be clear, Ricochet was holding it down in the junior division, and Okada was holding it down in the heavyweight division. So they weren't likely to cross paths. But you're telling me we never had an exhibition? And if it's anything like we saw with Okada versus Ospreay in their matchups over the years, this would be a banger easily. Now, with where Okada sits currently on the roster, I think this is one where Ricochet might be able to get the win over Okada. But I think with the Elite storyline, he would probably pick up the win. However, Ricochet orbiting the Elite and being one of those guys to help like fight away the enemy of these individuals who just have so much power in the company would be a really good value add to the overall storyline. At number 4, I've got Swerve Strickland. Now, Swerve and Ricochet, they've got minor history, but this matchup is more about the fact that Swerve has developed himself into something completely new, something completely identifiable, relatable, and megastar-ish in the last 18 months, while at that same time, Ricochet has kind of faded into the background of WWE. But here's the interesting thing. Swerve knows all about that. He knows about the trials and tribulations that Ricochet is enduring. He knows about that roller coaster ride, the hills and the valleys of the WWE experience. So knowing all those things, even if this was a one-off match, there's a lot of story-driven elements and really great threads that they could pull from having been in that other organization and kind of gone through similar experiences that would work really well in a matchup. And obviously, I think bringing the title into the mix adds a whole nother layer and another fun element to the story. Look, it might be predictable at that point if you put the title in the mix. Swerve is going to beat Ricochet. I don't see Ricochet defeating Swerve, especially for the title. But given that these two, they're so good, and if you give them the opportunity to just throw down in the main event for a World Championship, whether it's a Dynamite or a pay-per-view, after the derailing, like I said, roller coaster of a ride that they experienced in WWE, I think Ricochet versus Swerve isn't just a match that could happen. I think it should happen. So these top 3 could have gone in any particular order, but for me, number 3 is going to be Bryan Danielson. Look, Danielson's in the twilight of his career. He's constantly putting on banger after banger against a crop of younger and more youthful talent, and at the same time, he's growing ever closer to his impending retirement. Now, here's another crazy matchup that's never happened, Danielson versus Ricochet, but it makes more sense because Ricochet really started getting his footing under him like in the mid-2010s, and from early 2010s all the way up until right before he signed with AEW, Danielson was with WWE. In fact, Ricochet signed with WWE while Danielson was still there as Daniel Bryan. So this is a fresh, new, unique matchup that I think would create some real magic in the same vein as Danielson versus Ospreay that we saw at AEW Dynasty earlier this year. In what would no doubt be a hard-hitting affair, I think Danielson gives Ricochet the rub in this matchup. And also, I think it would solidify Ricochet as like a big star from a singles perspective in AEW, something that he never really got to ever since he got squashed by Brock Lesnar in Saudi Arabia for the WWE Championship years ago. And maybe he becomes the next mega babyface. Maybe he's the guy, like I said earlier, who goes after the Elite, and maybe if Swerve were to ever lose it to a heel, maybe somebody who's associated with the Elite, like a Jack Perry or a Kazuchika Okada, maybe that's the guy who can take the AEW World Championship back and get it for the good guys. Or maybe MJF's the guy who takes it off of Swerve and Ricochet takes off MJF. See, these could all work really well. It's all coming together. Speaking of all coming together, my number 2 is Will Ospreay. I know, but look, we need to run it back 8 years later. These men gained overnight notoriety from a matchup that Vader called a gymnastics performance. And they're 2 very different wrestlers today than they were 8 years ago. Will Ospreay is one of the best, if not the best professional wrestlers in the world today. And Ricochet, though like super underutilized during his time with WWE, he regularly proves that he has what it takes to hang in there with top tier performers. It's no question these 2 would have a heck of a rematch. My only questions are, number 1, who goes over? And number 2, do they recreate that spot? And number 1, man, there's so many people you could throw in here, right? It'd be interesting to see him against Adam Copeland. Christian Cage is doing the work of his career right now. There's a lot of great guys, but there's one guy that you just have to put him in there with because everybody's dying to see it, and that's Kenny Omega. I mean, it had to be Kenny, right? It's a little known fact that 10 years ago now, Kenny Omega and Ricochet, they actually had a match. It was a semifinal round matchup in the illustrious Battle of Los Angeles tournament. This was in 2014. It's a tournament that's put on, or was put on, by Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, also known as PWG. PWG is a wrestling promotion that really showcased like some of the brightest up-and-coming talent at the time. And dude, they had a stacked tournament this year of a lot of names that you would recognize within the top 3 wrestling promotions of North America today in WWE, AEW, and TNA. I'm talking about guys like AJ Styles, Zack Sabre Jr., all 4 members of the original Undisputed Era. So it's Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, and Bobby Fish. And they even had Candice LeRae wrestling her now husband, Johnny Gargano, in a quarterfinal match. I think Ricochet and Omega, they put on a decent match in that tournament. And it ended with Ricochet actually beating Omega to punch his ticket to the finals, where he won the whole thing by defeating Roderick Strong and I believe Johnny Gargano in a triple threat match to win the Battle of Los Angeles tournament. But the thing that really makes this matchup intriguing is, much like Ricochet and Ospreay themselves, Omega is a totally different performer than he was 10 years ago. Look, there's no doubt in my mind that much like Omega versus Ospreay, Ricochet versus Ospreay would be a match for the ages if these two were to square up. And I know Omega's currently on the shelf. He's injured. I think undoubtedly he'll be back. Anything barring him like having to retire, I think him coming back for what is potentially the final run of his career, it's a run that needs to see Ricochet and he clash one more time in their current incarnations of who they are as professionals. I think they both demonstrate unique blends of strength, technical wrestling, and high flying ability, and that makes them two of the most diverse wrestlers today. I do also think Ricochet needs to go over. I think that Kenny Omega is the bigger star, but much like Danielson, give him the rub. Kenny he's in the twilight of his career, man. He almost retired not that long ago just because of his injuries. So I think what you do is utilize the very little time you have left as a full-time superstar and give that rub to Ricochet. All right, guys, there you have it. My Elite 8, my top 8 dream opponents for Ricochet if he were to join AEW. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with those picks or who you would like to see him wrestle. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And I'll see you very soon.